around 5.2 million, the remainder falling to West Northamptonshire Council. The Housing Revenue account has a forecast overspend of 281,000 against the approved budget of just over 36 million. The HRA has been affected by a number of factors, but the main pressure is due to the application of the agreed pay award being higher than budgeted. The details of the movements against budget are set out in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions through you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I see any hands for this report? Any questions? Councillor James Hakewell.
Thank you, Chairman. The report, very clear, and I thank the officers for putting that together. All through it, it talks about risk, and towards the end there's an overall comment on the risks to the council. A couple of things, I suppose. We have the contingency, 5.4, page 25. The contingency budget is completely spent, and we are looking at period 8. Is that right? Yes, we are, period 8. So we've got 4 months of the year to go. And in that particular item, it says the contingency budget is held to meet unknown or unplanned, unbudgeted costs. Now, we had the maintained nursery schools item there, 650, which we're going to talk about later, energy costs, pay award, and so on. It seems difficult to understand how they are all unknown, but the point is we are zero on that contingency now. So my first question is, how do we replenish that, and what will we do in the next 4 months, given that we don't have that contingency reserve? Where will, if we have continuing deficits, the money come from? That's my first question, Chair.
I can take if you like. In response to the question, you're absolutely right, Councillor Hakewell. The contingency has been utilised in full, and that was the case at the end of period 7. If there were further pressures coming on in the budget, we would look to utilise reserves to support the general fund balance. And in terms of extending that further, in terms of how is it replenished, it's been replenished as part of the 23-24 budget process. So we have got a contingency embedded into the base for 23-24.
Sorry, so through you, Chair, which reserves would be used in these 4 months and at the year end? Where would they come from, given the contingency is now exhausted?
We'd look to access the, through you, Chair, sorry, we'd look to access the general reserves, but it would also be dependent on where the pressures are. There are a number of reserves that we have within the budget to meet future pressures. And it would depend on where we are come the 31st of March regarding that outturn position as to which reserves we may access.
Thank you. I mean, the comment I'd make, Chair, is that we are, like many councils across the country, in a parlous position and not dissimilar to the legacy councils that we were with. And that I think is really disappointing, because the change was intended to bring us back to sustainability, and I don't believe what we're reading at the moment is going to be sustainable, notwithstanding all the work that officers have done within that. And equally, Chairman, the 5.2 million for the Children's Trust, we did say at the end of the County Council that it was entirely wrong that ours was the first port of call for that 11 million county-wide, and our 5.2 million. And I know, Chairman, you've done a great job of trying to scrutinise the Children's Trust, but whichever way you look at it, the same basic systemic problem of increasing social care, in this case children's, is attacking our bottom line.
Yeah, I agree, Councillor Hakewell, and the problem is that the central government isn't giving us the money, and I think the officers will reflect that we need. You want to come in, Janice?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, just to point out that obviously, like many, as you've alluded to there, Council, like a number of authorities up and down the country, we've been affected this year both by significant inflationary impact generally and through energy costs, which certainly weren't foreseen at the start when we set the budget, as well as we've seen that coming through other areas such as we've got here as home to school transport, for instance. And we have had we have met with DLUC along with a number of local authorities, and the expectation is that authorities will be using their reserves in the first instance in order to meet some of these pressures going forward. In fact, DLUC have also raised that they were doing a further review of reserves in general across local authorities. So it is an expectation as well from government that they will be seeing a number of local authorities using reserves. So it is something that is the situation we're in now rather than something that's come from legacy arrangements.
Anything else, Councillor Higwell?
The use of reserves was the slippery path that the County Council went down until they were exhausted. What it says to me, and I hope that the political leadership are on board with this, is that we aren't on a long-term sustainable path. And that may or may not be due to extraneous circumstances, but it may also not be we're the only ones. But at that point, I don't know where in scrutiny and how strongly you, Chair, will be going to scrutiny. I know going to the executive to point that out. But the other item is home to school transport, again, very significant. I know there's a pressure of 7 million on 11.4 million next year. Home to school transport, is there any, we don't have a portfolio at all, do we? No. How do we resolve that particular issue? Because we're forecasting 7 million. We've got a significant amount in July of last year agreed by the Cabinet to try and cover it, but it just seems to be completely running away. I don't know, it would be fairer for the political leadership to answer that, but how are we going to try, and have we got anything in process to mitigate homeschool transport running out of control?
Any officers want to respond to that?
I'll do my best. There is a review of the homeschool transport. As you know, it was only disaggregated in October, November last year, previously led by the West. So a number of the contracts have been renewed under that previous arrangement. Now the contracts are with Northamptonshire. We are looking about the arrangements about how this can be controlled in the first instance, and then see how we can then start to bring some of those costs down. But obviously, when there are transport arrangements in place, we can't just cease those transport arrangements for those individuals that have that transport provided. What we are looking, though, is where, for instance, during COVID, a number of transport arrangements became single-user transport, perhaps rather than multi-user, and how we can perhaps look at how we can go back to seeing some of that multi-user to allow that transport cost to be brought down in that way. But it has, one of the significant growth items has been single-user transport items, and that's the work that's been undertaken to look at it in total, but that in particular.
Okay, Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly going back to the contingency budget. The numbers here, are they actuals to bring it up to date, or are they budgetary reallocations to last till the end of the financial year for those specific areas?
Sorry, through you, Chair. Sorry, I do sort of, I'm sorry.
So you both went for your buzzer.
Yeah, it's like a quiz show, isn't it? Yeah. So sorry about that. Through you, Chair. They are forecast for the full year. So the ones the first four are, the rest essentially is the use of contingency to help offset the bottom line, to be honest with you. And ultimately, the contingency will be utilised in year, but it will be more than utilised in year, as Councillor Hakewell points out, and that's when we will have to look back to reserves to meet the overspend position if we're not able to fully mitigate that before the end of the financial year.
Yeah, Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Chair. On that same point, that same theme, do we see any potential pressures? Because, of course, as you've mentioned, it's on zero. What do we forecast? Has there been any prior planning?
Through you, Chair, the forecast is the essentially the overspend that we've got of the 5.7 million. That's the big pressure we're seeing, and we will update that each month. We've got period 9 will be going shortly. Sorry, I forget which financial year I'm in sometimes. So period 9 will be going shortly through to executive, which does show a slight improvement of the overall position, but there's still a lot of work to be done to see how we can address that. But it's only, as I say, it's not just about this financial year, it's looking forward. So we've picked up what we believe are recurring implications of that overspend as part of the budget setting process for 23-24. And any one-off items obviously will stay as is, but we are still working on how we can start to bring that down before the end of year and therefore reduce the impact on our reserves.
Is that specifically on the contingency budget?
No, the rest
yeah.
of it will be met from, essentially, if we can't meet it in year, will be met from council reserves.
Right. Any further questions? Councillor Lavelle.
Mr. Chairman, I know that in previous meetings you have looked to me to ask a raft of questions, and I have always been happy to oblige. Having said that, things have changed. I think that we have more confidence in the officers now. Certainly, I personally have a lot more confidence in them insofar as we've got to know them. And what has come out of this report, subject to what has been said already, I think is actually very good. Excuse me, and I am comforted by the fact that we have some reasonable explanations here, fairly small variances, which probably don't need a huge amount of scrutiny on our part. So I think really, officers, well done.
Yeah. Thank you for that. A couple of things from me then, and the first one is to do with the Corby International Pool. The word the council will monitor closely, that just tells us we'll monitor the price going up or coming down. Is there something we're doing, and could we find out what we're doing to get that price down? Are we dealing with different electricity companies to try and get it? It's just that this is really, really bad for us, and it's not our fault that the price is going up, but just monitoring it isn't the reason to get out of it. We've got to look at a reason to get out of this big price increase.
This issue isn't just associated with the pool, it's any estate that we've got. Certainly our management team that oversee the pool are working closely with Jonathan's team to look at can we renegotiate the different contracts that we've got, because they're not all harmonised at the moment. So absolutely, we don't just sit there and monitor, we look at different ways that we can reduce the spend there. Over the period of, slightly aged now, but over the period of the pandemic, we replaced all of the lighting in the pool for more efficient LED lighting. However, there's only so much that we can do with the actual running of the building in that sense. We have reviewed things like the water temperatures and consulted with users of the pool about whether reducing those any further would have been an option, but we're pretty much close to where we are, and those are the main running costs associated with electric within the pool. We have also seen other cost pressures, so for example the chemicals that we use, they've increased again because of the challenges that we've got across Europe. In that sense, we are monitoring these. We try and look for the trends and try and get ahead of them, but we work corporately to try and look for any opportunities to streamline the contracts that we've got and bring them together.
And my other question is to do with car parks. And we've had this situation of Corby car parks coming back. We got told last year that I don't think the officers are aware of, that we had to pay an income to another company for the rental of some of the car parking. I'm just wondering why there's a pressure because of the lack of use of the car park, and then we as a council decide to rent out from a social club car parking spaces. We've known this for a long time. Why did we rent out car parking spaces and not use the spaces that we've got that we're not getting money for within our own car parks? Have you got any idea on that? And if not, can you come back to me on that, please? And it's to do with we hire out the Corby Conservative Club for hiring out, for paying for car parking, where I just find that strange when we've got spaces in our own car park.
I normally try and answer every question, but unfortunately that's one that I can't answer on this occasion. But we can certainly go back to George and see if we can get an explanation to support you with that. Was there a particular paragraph reference in the report?
What it says is that due to reduction on car parking, we're £137,000 down, and I think we're paying £25,000 a year or something for a private club to use a car parking. So you just think, if you're aware of that, why did we not use the excess car parks we've got anyway?
Through you, Chair, it's just a paragraph number.
Yes, page 34. Sorry, page 34, car parks, Corby Kettering. Yeah, thank you.
Just on 4.15, the local government funding comes from the high street. This is about businesses going into recession and the potential for that to create pressure on business rates. I just want to know, and there's a theme around the questions that I ask, what indications do you have so far of the scale of liquidation expected to come? And there has been some more positive news from Bank of England apparently going to U-turn, so it may not be as bad as we expect. But has there been any prior for sort of planning or analysis, particularly the indicators maybe from not paying on time, going to sort of judiciary, etc.? What indications do you have of the scale of collapse in our high streets?
Through you, Chair. Yes, I mean this is indicated as a risk, but at the moment the business rates baseline is holding up, and we are actually still seeing growth. I mean, we've got a new prison coming on stream very shortly within the business rates. So as well as new warehousing facilities as well. So the business rates is still holding in totality, but obviously there's a risk around High Street in particular, those smaller ones. But a lot of those do get business rates relief. So it depends on the nature of where we might see any slippage. But at the moment it is holding for the business rates we have. We are aware though, obviously we've recently had a business rates revaluation to come into effect from 1st of April 2023. So we've yet to understand fully what the impact of that will be from the business rate payers, and see what if there's any knockback as a result of that and any implications. But at the moment it is still holding for us.
Thank you. Any further questions? And I think it is just to note the report. Is that agreed by everybody? Yeah, all those in favour? Thank you very much. The next report is the Maintained Nurseries Supplementary, which you've now got. Has everybody had a chance to read the report? Have I? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Guy. How could I forget you? Hey, we were going to put this to the end and we changed our mind, so I apologise for that. Yeah. Performance indicator report for corporate services, period 8. Over to you, Guy. Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. I must have been in stealth mode. But before I present the report, actually, Chair, I just wanted to introduce my colleague Rob Atkins, who's the interim head of performance intelligence and partnerships. And what will happen in the not too distant future, Rob, by the way, reports to Janice, and what will happen in the not too distant future is my presentation of this report will segue over to Rob, and Rob will take the report going forwards until his predecessor arrives. But we're very pleased to have Rob, and Rob is highly experienced, and I've already shared, as has Janice, some of the areas that members are particularly interested in around the performance reporting, so I'm sure we'll perhaps come on to that. The report, I wasn't going to do too much of an introduction, Chair, as per normal. It's the period 8 report, so it's November. I think there is some benefits in looking at this alongside the budget report. Obviously is the P8, the period 8 report as well, so you get that kind of the mix of the financial performance and the service performance. This, of course, is particularly focused in on corporate services. So it's a more distilled suite of indicators. Members are very welcome to look at the wider, broader suite of indicators that get reported through to executive on a monthly basis as well, where you'll see the broader set. There's 2 appendices, so the corporate performance indicators, and also the that's Appendix A. Appendix B is the indicators around our staffing resources, Chair. So I think rather than saying anything else, I'll just hand over to members for any queries. And as per usual, I will share the pleasure of answering the questions with my colleagues, Chair. Thank you.
Right, have we got any hands up for this? I'm looking around the table. Have we got any hands up? Councillor Hakewell, thank you.
I was always waiting for someone else. It really is the same point that we make about vacancies, and I thank Guy for trying to put some explanations in, but we are still on this basis 1,082. Am I right in saying that? Page 60. 1,082 vacancies with a full-time equivalent of 944. And is that, it's really hard to work it out, is that on a total of 4,027 that we should have? So what I'm really asking the question is, we've got a significant number of vacancies. If 1,082 or the full-time equivalents of 944 suddenly were recruited tomorrow, which of the figures on the left would that affect? You see what I'm trying to say? Try to think of some member of the public reading these items. So we've got 944 full-time equivalent vacancies. How many would we therefore have? Is that part of the 3644 or part of the 2276? Just trying to understand that. I know, Chairman, we've had this conversation before, and around the table most of us have been confused. I now understand a bucket, by the way, a bucket post, whatever that is.
But do you want to come in on that? Like, I know that you're still trying to get the headcount sorted, but for us as members, this is what we've seen, and this is what the press will see as well, 944 vacancies.
Chair, I mean, I'm happy to come in, and if colleagues want to add their context to it, they're very welcome to. I think before answering the specific question, I think what we had acknowledged and what I'd acknowledged in the past was that what you've got in front of you is an imperfect set of data, in that they're not actually set up for answering the question, how many vacancies have we got in totality in the organisation that we would try and fill at any one point in a time, because we do have posts in the establishment that we will not want to fill. So, for example, and I think one of the examples I gave before was if a member of staff is seconded, then they'll have a post they've moved to, and there'll be a post they've come from. And also we've got situations where you might have someone who delivers newsletters or casual workers for which there are posts established for. So they will show up. Technically, they're a vacancy when those people aren't actually in post. So given the methodology that we utilise for the system, there's always going to be a set of vacant posts within there. In answer to your specific question, and I say if a colleague wants to correct me, my understanding is that what the vacancies is doing is matched against posts. So the employees is measuring what the head count of people we've got, both in terms of the number of people, the head count, and the full-time equivalent. The post is looking at the number of posts that we've got. Some of those are posts where people will be in post. Some of them will be transitional vacancies, so someone leaves, and we're actually recruiting against that post. And some of them will be posts, as I said, that actually we've got no intention of recruiting against, but we've left in the establishment because they are part of our audit trail. What I would add, Chair, if I may, is there is a piece of work going on where we are actually doing some reconciliation to get a more accurate and clear picture of those posts that we can present to members, which is kind of our residual vacancies that we would be looking to recruit at any period of time. And that goes back to Councillor Hakewell's point around then if there are a set number of vacancies, how many of them would you actually need to fill at that point in time? What I would say is I did start off this item, Chair, by introducing Rob Atkins, and what I'm not going to do is to ask Rob if he will answer this question. All I would say is these are some of the things that Janice, Rob and myself have spoken about, and the performance team, just in terms of getting data that we think is just clearer, not just for members, but also for members of the public. So, Chair, I think my colleague also wants to come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So just to give you a bit of an idea of the piece of work that Guy referred to, so all of our managers will say, actually, the system, the ERP Gold, is a bit cumbersome to work with. And that has partly been driven as well by the bringing of information from 5 different councils and the way that was set up. Starting in our housing and homelessness department, we've started looking at what the challenges are being faced and what resource it takes to resolve that moving forward from different departments within the authority. So sometimes it will require a couple of days' work by a manager. Another day it will require X number of days' work from someone from Janice's team from a finance perspective. And then there will be a further piece of work that we have to do through business systems, which is do all the sort of HR changes for us. So at the moment, what we're trying to do is come up with the solution that enables us to confidently say these are our current vacancies and they're aligned correctly to the correct budget managers. And once we've done that, that will enable us to bring forward a proposal to the corporate leadership team about what would be the resource required to crack the nut, once and for all.
Councillor Hakewell.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. What concerns me is that we've just gone through the scrutiny meetings, all of us, and what I don't understand and have never understood is how the different directorates and portfolios predict and levy council tax and money to pay for people when there are so many vacancies. I don't understand how, in running the organisation called Northamptonshire Council, we can do that when you look at our future budget based on the so many vagaries of, albeit cumbersome system, 5 previous councils. And just as a question there, we're spending £1.2 million on agency spend, and the voluntary turnover, 18, 15%, 17%. So my question is, how can we forecast what we're going to do? I mean, if we were an army going into battle, how would we forecast how many soldiers we've got on the front line and how much we need to pay them and feed them when this statistic has come to our committee every month, and every month we've rather questioned how you do that? So how do the directors work out how many people they've got to pay as we then work back to how much council tax we're taking from the people of Northamptonshire?
Guy, over to you.
Chair, I'll quite happily make the first stab at the answer, because I think the straightforward answer for that would be the staffing establishment. So if I take my own situation, my own service as an example, I have a staffing budget, and it's for me to make sure that I'm managing the service within that staffing budget and that I don't exceed the establishment. And if I've got vacancies in there, then they're justifiable in terms of I might have a restructure pending. So therefore, taking on permanent members of staff might not be the right thing to do at that particular time while we're doing that. Or it might be, and I know we've had a discussion about this before, times where there's agency staff that obviously we need to take on, particularly where we might have challenging labour markets, or we might have periods where someone's on maternity leave and we just need to cover it for a period of time, or we're actually doing something where we're transitioning a service and we're taking a view about exactly what longer term establishment we need in place. So I think the simple answer to that question is by carefully looking at the establishment budget and looking at how we're spending against that, but also keeping the context of are we delivering the service that we need to deliver. I think, as my colleague David Watts said, the Unitary Authority inherited a number of posts. What all managers are doing are looking at what is needed to deliver the services going forwards within the financial, the challenging financial situation, but also the changing needs of the residents. So I think it's a dynamic process, but there are safeguards and controls in place that make sure that it isn't just a free-for-all, Chair, and there is some controls in place around the budgets.
I agree, but it is a confusion of how we interpret things. And if we interpret things by reading this, other people do as well. And this is why we need this. It's like a factory. You make this amount of widgets. You need that amount of people to make the widgets. That's your staff. And we're being told. And I think it's something that we have to look in more detail of. And we need to offer yourselves how long it's going to take. I've got Councillor Brown, then Councillor Lavelle, and then David, you come in after that. It's okay. Yeah. So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the use of agency staff.
was it on the same thing? No. Or
Certainly
sort of.
different.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Okay. I want David to be able to come in with the answer to it.
They mentioned staffing budgets and making sure each departments were kind of contained within those staffing budgets. When taking into these agency costs into account, it would be really useful for us, I feel, if we could have some kind of understanding of where those staffing budgets are and whether these agency budgets are okay in regards to those staffing budgets, or are they kind of stretching those staffing budgets? We've seen a big increase now in the use of agency staff, so it's certainly worrying me that figure's only going one way at the moment. I'm also quite interested to learn, are we tracking converting some of these agency staff to full-time staff? And if we are, what's the performance there? And if we're not, could we perhaps consider it?
So I suppose one of my answers to that is sometimes agency is the most appropriate use. And just to give you some examples, every winter I get winter discharge monies through the NHS, which I get for a period of 4 months. There is no point me recruiting into those posts permanently. I use agency staff for that. This year we've had rough sleepers initiatives. Again, temporary money. Do I recruit to it permanently? Or do I use agency staff? I've had Homes for Ukraine money, which enables me to provide support services. Again, temporary money, not guaranteed. I cannot expose the authority to permanent recruitments that then may leave us liable to redundancy costs in the future. So there are appropriate times to use agency staff. Just in addition to what Guy said around the work that he does, I meet regularly with finance business partners. Each of my assistant directors meet with the finance teams as well, and are regularly checking things like our staffing costs, making sure they're appropriate. They work within their divisional management teams to make sure that we're not recruiting above and beyond establishment. And I think the ultimate measure for me is my agency spend should not outstrip my overall budget in that, which I think is the question you're asking, Councillor Brown. How do we make sure that we're not spending more than the budget? And that's the expectation that Janice and Mark put through to us, that, well, if you use agency staff, you shouldn't be overspending on your budget. You do it within that financial envelope.
Yeah, but sometimes it means you're using less amount of staff to counteract the amount of cost you're paying on your agency. That's what was said at Scrutiny. But we've got Councillor Lavelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on the points which have just been made, the explanations we've received have been how officers are happy with the numbers and how they all fit together. From this committee's point of view, we need to know when is a vacancy not a vacancy, and I would suggest the answer is when it's not looking to be filled. It would be very helpful to know, of the 900-odd vacant posts, supposedly vacant posts, how many of those are we actually trying to fill? And similarly with the agencies, you've already said that there are two types of agencies, and I quite understand that. Some which are taking, some which are a short-term measure to fill a vacant position, and others which are filling a position because somebody is on maternity leave or the short-time or the short-term things which you mentioned. It would be helpful for this committee's point of view to understand the difference, so we know that if there are, for example, 10 agency staff operating because we can't fill the posts any other way, then that is helpful information. The number of agency staff covering for people who are on maternity leave is less relevant because they're clearly a short-term thing which has to be done and there is no alternative. So I think from our point of view, more clarity on those points would be helpful, please.
Thank you. So I think the column where you do have agency and it shows the 156, that will include the posts that we think we have to cover with agency staff, but we don't separate out that it's because we can't recruit to posts. What I do have is an intelligence around which posts we can't recruit to. So, for example, in housing, we know that that's predominantly trades that we struggle to recruit to, whereas in other areas it may be more about, as you say, covering maternity or covering long-term sick, where we have to fulfil a rota in order to do that. I think the other example of where you may have a vacancy, which is showing as a vacancy, and you are not intending to fill it at the moment, is where we've got restructures going on, and that's fluid. So a manager may be thinking, well, I want to reorganise my services and I want to restructure, and what they are not going to do is recruit into their posts until they've undertaken that piece of work, in order for them to understand, well, what's the structure that I do need in my new structure moving forward, if I reorganise the services, if I improve efficiency. And I get why the number scares people, but actually in an organisation of this size, with the amounts of teams and services that we do have, it will add up, and it will, you know, across all of the different elements of either transformation or service restructure that we're seeing, those numbers will add up.
Yes, if I may, I understand all that, and it sounds great, and I've every confidence that, without wishing to sound sort of patronising, you know what you're doing, but it doesn't help us. As I say, if there were to be more analysis, so if total vacancies 944, 500 are we're not looking to fill, 300 we're looking are vacant because there is a potential for some restructuring, 200 we need to fill. I just think that that analysis would be helpful for this committee.
Chair, thank you. I'll be quick. I think Councillor Vell's hit the nail on the head, if I can be honest with you, because I think the point we're making is the data set we've got at the moment, it wasn't constructed to carry out that kind of analysis, which is really, really useful to do at a kind of a group basis. What you're hearing us say is in individual services, we do that analysis, which discreetly in small services is quite easy, but building it up into a big picture using the system we've got isn't actually a very easy thing to do. By the time you've done it, it's out of date. So what is happening is there's a piece of work that's reconciling the data sets that we've got, that's cleansing them, and is actually starting to construct them in a way that does give us this better insight. And you may recall, I think I did report to this committee some months ago, Chair, that actually we've looked at some other authorities that have gone through a similar journey to us, and they've been further ahead than us in terms of time, but haven't quite caught on to this problem. We've caught onto the problem, and we're working to cleanse that data. And I think the other thing is really what we're keen to do as well is to make sure we get that data quality right at source, so that when we are pulling that analysis off, we actually can have some reliance on that data that we've got. But it is taking a bit of time to get there.
It was going to be very similar to what Guy said, just using different words. I mean, what I would say is ERP is not set up to produce a report like that. And for us to do that analysis, it becomes very time-consuming, and it involves a lot of manual intervention. So every month when we do this, I have a number of assistant directors and service managers that have to go away, validate, check, and bring back just to do what we're doing here. So to do that next level and then go down to, okay, and how many are on maternity leave, how many are covering long-term sick, how many are covering short-term sickness, but we need to cover the rotas because the service wouldn't be safe, etc. It becomes very challenging for our services to do their day job and then do that analysis on top, whereas the individual team managers will know, well, I need to bring someone in to cover that because a rota needs covering, if that makes sense. Sorry.
Yeah, Councillor Clune, you're next, but I think that what we're trying to do is to help you, and it's where you're looking at agency staff that could probably be converted into full-time members of staff. I remember we did some work at the DLO about 8-9 years ago when you get the spend under over £100. I went through it with Councillor Beattie, who was leader, and we looked at the amount of agency staff in our depot then, and we had just a couple of weeks converted them onto full-time. Said, look, do you want these full-time roles? Yes, and it's better to work for the council and be agency, and that is where we want to help yourselves and identify them. David, and then you, Councillor Coon, is that okay?
Every agency member of staff that we think is good at their job, we have that conversation with.
Councillor Coon.
Yes, pretty much what you've just been saying there, Chair, but I would ask, David mentioned the use of temporary personnel or agency personnel to cover tasks, for want of a better word, that maybe last for 4 months. Would it be feasible to employ a person on a full-time basis for that period and then transfer them to another post within the authority for the other 8 months, as it were? It'd be sort of multi-scaling, multitasking, whatever the case may be. Would that be feasible?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So it really depends on the roles that you're covering. So if of the examples that I gave you earlier on around things like Rust Sleeping Initiative, those people will probably be someone who would be interested in a housing role, but looking further afield in the organisation, they may not be interested in that. Same around things like our adult social care winter pressure funds. It's usually things like we'll employ some temporary occupational therapists in order to bolster our numbers, or some brokerage staff who work with the independent care sector to negotiate costs and arrange care. So we bolster the team, we make it bigger. Some of them may have transferable skills and may be interested in doing that. And they have access to our internal job vacancies whilst they're working for us and employed by us as well. But quite often, the skill set is very niche that we're bringing people in to fix services or add extra capacity.
So this report, Councillor James Hakewell.
Thank you. One or two questions that have clearly arisen in that conversation. The first one is the cumbersome system and the difficulty. Are there plans in terms of getting a better software to give better management information? Question one.
I'll take that, Chair. No, we have a contract with ERP that was arranged as part of when we moved over into the new authority. But it's not just ourselves, we're part of that, of a joint arrangement with both ourselves, West, Milton Keynes and Cambridgeshire County Council, that we bind that as a joint arrangement, and that contract's still got a couple of years or so to run with it. What we do need to look at is how we can get the data correct and cleansed and accurate is the first thing, because, you know, as we know, rubbish in, rubbish out. So we've got to make sure that the data is absolutely accurate, and then what we'll be doing in the background is working how we can improve the reporting standards as part of that. But we need to do that and linked up with our colleagues across the other lead authorities, because it has to be changes that are made to the system, and we're all on the system. So it's part of making sure that we work alongside our colleagues as well to do that.
Thank you, Chairman. We scrutinise sort of monthly, bi-monthly in this particular forum. What I don't really understand, and there is no portfolio holder here tonight, the portfolio holders of the executive must be scrutinising this day in, day out. If they're using the same data and we're confused, I don't know where that comes from, but maybe that's a rhetorical question for the portfolio holders in that way. The other aspect of this, Chairman, and you've been in the same scrutiny meetings as I have, as we went through scrutiny over the last couple of weeks, every single department had savings due to vacancies, and there was a physical, you know, an amount of money, savings due to vacancies. And that aspect, when you are looking at a background of many people working within the authority, and I take some of the smaller jobs, but many people working in the authority, if there's that number of vacancies, the people who are left are under more stress to try and, presumably, if the vacancy is relevant, do more work in that way. And what really concerns me is that when we are trying to scrutinise the budget and savings are considered to be not using a budget that we started off with because there's half a dozen or a dozen or 15, or in this circumstance 269 covering vacancies, that neither seems fair to the hard-working staff or indeed fair to the people who are paying the council tax. So my question on that one is, how do we cope with that? We should not be levying at the beginning of a financial year a staff complement and a value that we never achieve, and we're in period 8, and I don't expect this to be any different in period 12. So how do we actually, it almost as if we're putting that in the kitty.
So I think what I would say is that in those circumstances, your question earlier on was about how do we square things off as an authority. We're eating into contingencies. If I can make savings by reducing vacancies but improving the efficiency of the service, because that's the key. If you just reduce the vacancies and you don't do anything around the efficiency, you put more pressure on the existing staff. So that's where I will encourage my managers and my teams to look about how can we improve that process so we don't need as many staff, therefore we don't have to recruit to those vacancies. And that's what I'm expecting all of my CLT colleagues to do in their area, about looking at different ways of doing things, looking at new technology, looking at the next bits of best practice about the way that we do things. A big example in social care is trying to move to more preventative approaches and trying to stop people coming in and requiring our services. Carrying out your annual reviews in social care is a key thing, because if you don't get your annual review, that person stands a greater risk coming to you for an emergency assessment of some sort. So regular review, regular checks and balances are a part of that. And at the moment, we're trying to shift more to that preventative and an understanding where we need to go to. But that's one example of how I would square off why I might put a vacancy saving in to a budget line, because I think that in this area I can deliver a service more efficiently, or the managers have told me we think that we can deliver a service more efficiently by X, Y and Z. And some of that might be through a new IT system. One example which was approved was the stores at Corby. So recognising that we have a lot of wasted time of our trades going to builders merchants to pick up the things that they need. Well, let's replicate the stores system that we've got in Kettering, and then we can have a back office ordering system so the trades can go out and do what they're paid to do, which is fix things. So just a couple of real examples of how we can do that.
Thank you. Without wishing to put words into Councillor Hakel's mouth, I think what he was going to go on to say, or if he wasn't, I will make the point anyway, is that if, when setting the budgets, and I know that this is not budget setting I'm looking at now, but setting the budget, it's assumed that we have to budget for all these vacancies. But if actually we know that not all the vacancies are going to be filled for whatever reason, then it could be argued that we're raising the council tax by a greater amount than we need to cover these staff costs, which we don't think we're actually going to have to pay. Is that fair?
I don't think it is a fair point. So I can't reduce the posts out until I've consulted. If I'm changing a service and impacting on the staff there, changing a structure, I have to consult with those staff. And that consultation may be in this year. So we have to set a budget assuming that, and not presuming that the consultation or the decision making will go the way that we need it to go. So I absolutely get where you're coming from, Councillor Level, but from my perspective, I can't take budget out until I know that actually there's support for that change to be made, and then we've consulted and gone through all the necessary processes that we need to. But I understand the point that you're making.
Any further questions? Councillor Hakewell.
It would make a lot more sense if the budget for held vacancies was held centrally. In other words, that each department budgeted for those that they've got and would expect to employ within that year, and then this sort of additional holding vacancies was in a central fund, and drawn upon if the vacancy was filled. And if it wasn't, it would not be drawn upon. In that way, it might be easier for us to scrutinise, and indeed that contingency budget, which is holding open for potential employees, could be scrutinised and monitored. So maybe that's a recommendation rather than having it in all the different directorates.
David?
The only thing that I would say to that is we'd probably end up with a lot of departments as showing as overspent because you've got a centralised budget there. So it becomes more troublesome then for us to account for the activities that we need to. Always happy to take suggestions and talk to CLT colleagues and see whether it's something that's practical. What I would say is we are trying to build the most time-efficient systems and to enable managers that need to recruit when they need to employ agency staff when they need to. And if the money and the vacancies sit elsewhere, that can make it more complicated for them to do it. Because they haven't got that, they don't have the budget to recruit to their vacancy.
I think we've had quite a long debate on this tonight, and I think that what I'd like to see, however this committee looks in 6 months' time, I think that we'll get these figures through again, and if there's still this confusion, I think we've got to have a scrutiny look at the way the staffing is given to members, and I think that would help the executive as well. Our job is to help the executive understand things, of course, and I think that in 6 months' time it may be worthwhile this committee giving you its time to go away and look at it as officers, get the full report on staffing at the council, and there will be some posts, and I know because I go around the country like a lot of years, where we just can't fill. And all over the country you've got a shortage in certain areas of councils, and I know how difficult it is for you, but this is what we want to know. We want to know what are the areas where you can't fill, where are we struggling, what can we do to help you, and that's what we're about with Scrutiny, of course. Yeah. Adele, you want to come in there?
Through you, Chair. So we've been discussing this anyway about at Scrutiny Commission. So I'm going to bring a report which talks about the national recruitment and retention issues that we've got. So we've got lots of data from the Local Government Association that's talking about the issues that councils are facing throughout the country and actually the public sector and private sector. We know that a number of employees left the workforce after COVID, so the 50 plus moved on and didn't actually go back to work, a lot of them. So that meant that there was a huge gap in the way that we were able to recruit. So what I've committed to is bringing that report to Scrutiny Commission and talking about those challenges, but also then talking about it in the context of Northamptonshire, and then talking about our people plan, talking about our recruitment strategies, talking about our retention plans and what we're doing as a local authority to try to resolve the issues that we have and try and bring people in, whether that's through career pathways, apprenticeships, etc., and talk to members about that so they understand in the wider context of them why we have agency and vacancies, etc. So that will be going to Scrutiny Commission in the next few months.
After that, because you're looking at that part of it, we're looking at the financial part of it, of course. So there may be something from that we then, or whatever the committee is in the future, looks at. Any other comments on this part of the report? Any other comments on the report? No? Right, the report says just to note the report. Is that agreed? All those in favour? Right, the next report is the Maintained Nurseries Supplement Fund. You've all had this. Can I thank the members? And I know that some members, because of commitments, couldn't attend. So I thank you for letting me know. And I'd like to thank the members that did attend. We did have quite a few meetings. You've all seen the recommendations for this report. Which I've got somewhere. So there's a recommendation on this.
It's on, that's there.
Yeah, that's fine. Right, has everybody read the recommendations? Is there any comments on the recommendations of this report? Councillor James Hakewell?
Yeah, I would just like to say that to thank our officer colleague who came with us, and I attended all of the meetings and the visits to the 4 maintained nurseries, and I think it should definitely go on record that they are all doing an equivalent and very good job for those young people who find themselves at those nurseries and the parents. The sort of education and the environment was brilliant throughout. And I don't think there was any one nursery that you would say was better or worse than another. They were all particularly good, and the staff and other people who welcomed us in and allowed us to ask those questions. So I think that is really important to go on the record. Chairman, the only thing I have, and we're talking of the recommendation, I'm assuming, in 3.1 on page 5. I don't understand the first bullet point, whether it could be any simpler, but it says the Maintain Nurseries Task and Finish Group supports the Executive's decision to adopt a participation-based rate of funding for the de-delegation of the Maintain Nurseries supplement of the dedicated schools grant. It just, I don't know whether it makes sense to me. If it makes sense to everyone else, shout me down. But my view was that the conclusion was the decision to adopt. Well, I thought we did last week, but what I was going to suggest was the Maintain Task and Finish Group, the first bullet point, supports the Executive's decision to adopt a participation-based rate of funding for, and then get the de-delegation of out, so of funding for the Maintain Nurseries supplement, and that was it. That's what the Executive said. Now, I don't know if anyone else has a thing. Of the dedicated schools grant, well, it's blatantly obvious it's the dedicated schools
I'm
grant.
happy with that amendment. Is anybody else happy with that amendment? I've got Paul. Yeah. Is that okay?
So take the of the dedicated schools bit out.
Yeah.
So are you, is our colleague who's noting that, happy with that? Just seen.
Brilliant. Thank you. And could I thank all the officers as well, and the admin staff who helped us with this, who organised all the visits and everything else. We do recognise all the hard work that went into this, and I'd like to thank all the schools and the schools forum and everybody else who came to meet us, and what we did was what Scrutiny is about. So thank you, everybody. Any other comments on this? Councillor Lavelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 3 of the appendix, while I'm flattered that my photograph is featured on that page, I did actually withdraw from the working group prior to its first meeting. Is it right that I'm still included?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to say both yourself and Councillor North didn't attend meetings, and you did let us know, Councillor Lavelle. So could that be amended? And I would also like another picture, because my shirt collar's out all the time on these pictures.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah. So I'll have to see somebody about that. But and I'd like to also thank Councillor Anslow, who's not on the committee, but sat on it because she was sort of part of it beforehand as a sub. So thanks for that. And that is noted, Councillor Bell, and thank you for letting us know. Is that okay, Raj? Yeah? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Do you want it moving? Or?
Sorry? Yeah, I want to move it in a seconder, please.
I'll move it.
Second up, brilliant. Thank you, and that's carried. Now we're going on to the... Sorry. Okay. Yeah. All those in favour? Yeah. All those against? And that is carried. Thank you. Again, a lot of work went into this. I'd like to thank the executive members, officers and administration staff for all the support they gave us during this. Also, I'd like to thank all the members. We had a good turnout of members at all these meetings. A lot of questions were asked. There's lists and lists of them. I'd like to thank Paul for working with us on this, and Adele and Janice as well. Any questions or comments on this, please? And I've got Councillor Hakewell, your light's on.
Oh, sorry.
Any comments on the scrutiny report?
Right, I'll put the light on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I mean, my overwhelming thought is, and I made the point earlier, that what we were seeing was, in my opinion, an unsustainable future for the council along with other councils. I've already made the point about holding vacancies and filling budget gaps within departments in that way. My view is that we as a scrutiny committee, and I speak from experience, not so much of it, but some of it bitter experience, that when we look at things like children's home to school transport, adult social care, and the pressures on this budget, and the inability of us to go beyond 5%, even if it was politically palatable, I just think we are in a very risky situation. The word risk appears from our officer colleagues in many places. So it really does worry me from past experience and present experience that we've done a good scrutiny, but that I would want to hear from the executive how they can do anything to mitigate the problems that we uncovered in this particular process. So I don't know how you are going to forward this to the executive, but I'd either like that minuted or to have some comment.
What is this isn't my report, this is a report of this committee. And what I'd like is a small working group to work with me in formulating what I'm going to say to the executive, because it's ours, yeah. I don't think we can do all that tonight. There's a lot of detail in this report. If anybody wants to raise anything tonight, they can do. But if we get 3 or 4 of us sitting down, I'd want it to be conservative, heavy, because that's the way this council is, that's the way this group is, and we'll go from there. So if anybody's interested, all it is a quick 3 or 4 hour, well, 3 hour meeting is sitting down, going through some of the salient points from this. Sorry? Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Hakewell? Yeah.
I'd be more than happy with that.
Yeah.
The second question I have is, and it was quite intriguing, at a meeting I had earlier today, we were symptomatically talking about the bulky items. You'll wonder where I'm going here. Bulky items collection service from this council. And we were sitting around the table talking about the £30 charge and so on. I went onto the web and the £30 charge is now 35. I'm not really quite sure how that happened, but we did learn that fees and charges were a delegated item. So my point is that's obviously gone up by £5, which is a fair chunk, and it's just one. In the scrutiny, we found a revenue income of £227,000 for fees and charges. And in this document, we have asked, and we did ask last week, if we could have a full list of those fees and charges. And I don't know when we're going to get it. I assume the delegation to officers that has done that is somewhere. But the point about being a councillor, and I always use the example of 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon in Sainsbury's, someone says, well, when the heck did you put that up by £5 or planning or whatever it is? We should, 78 of us, know, even if we're not going to have any say in it, exactly what those fees and charges are going up. And therefore, I would reiterate, as soon as is possible, we need a list of those fees and charges. Particularly, we would focus on the ones we understand and get to know, what the percentage uplift is that creates a 227,000 increase. It would also be interesting, and I made the point last week as well, £227,000 more than what? In other words, what is the current amount? So when are we going to get that list so that we can be informed?
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, what we've tried to do in the drafting of this, particularly on pages 2 and 3 of the draft submission, is capture some of the key running themes that came out of the sessions. And Councillor Haycore is absolutely correct. Things such as fees and charges and trying to get a better grasp of what they are, how much it's being proposed they go up, etc., which was requested last year, as the Chair said, is something that really members do need to have sight of, because obviously fees and charges are a major income stream for the council. And whilst no one's questioning that things have to go up, sometimes they can go down, but mostly up, you know, getting some idea of perspective and an idea if there are particular pressures in certain areas that are leading to fees and charges going up higher than you would expect is important. So I think that message is clearly highlighted in the submission. And I think the other point, again, that was made several times, is that where you have any budget heading, whether it's a significant saving or, well, whether it's a saving or an increase, you need that base figure to get an assessment, again, of whether it seems to be reasonable, or there may be questions arising from that. Well, why has that gone up by so much? I mean, it's been mentioned home to school transport, which you know, there's a £7 million increase for next year on a I can't remember if it's 10.5 or 11.5 whatever budget, and that's a significant significant increase. And there was a discussion earlier on that. But you need to have that base figure so that you can understand. And that includes with savings as well, to make sure that the savings on the face of it are achievable. But unless you know what the base figure is, I mean, 50,000 on a £5 million budget is probably achievable. 50,000 on a £150,000 budget, you might want to ask a question about. So I think that information for future exercises, and I think having sat through a number of scrutiny sessions this year and last year, I think that you know, getting our what we would expect, or you would expect as a scrutiny committee coming into these exercises, and the information that you require to do a full and comprehensive job is improving, but it needs to obviously improve further. And I think the submission highlights some of the key areas of that, as well as picking up some of the key themes that came out of all the sessions, such as staffing, and we've had a discussion about that, and vacancies and retention and recruitment. And utility costs, obviously, is another one. I would, if I may, Chair, just point out that I will need to submit something in writing for the executive agenda this Wednesday.
Will you?
Yeah. Now, that's not to say it couldn't be supplemented by your presentation at committee, but really there's a need to obviously get something at least on the table, even if it's added to over the next 7 or 8 days.
Yeah.
So I think from my point of view, what I was looking for was a steer from this committee tonight, whether they feel this, and I appreciate members haven't had a great deal of time to look at this, but whether they feel it's captured all the key points that were made during the various scrutiny sessions, and we can take that forward.
Yeah. I think it does. It's got things, Councillor Hakewell and everybody else, like some of the legacy budgets were giving out figures that they were never going to get to, and that's caused our officers problems, because they thought they were going to make, I think it was Wellingborough crematorium, a certain amount of money in, Corby Lloyd Sports Centre as well, and they didn't get that money in, and they were never going to achieve it anyway. And so the things like that are hitting us. So there are a lot in there that we can work with. So is there anything that people have seen missing in the report? There is one thing that, and it's to do with the Children's Trust, that I'd like to add in to it, and it is, we met with the Children's Trust on 2 occasions. There were very, very serious concerns about the overspend to the Children's Trust, which worked out about 5.2 million for us. the information from the trust lacked detail through the meetings we had with them, and more detail came at the second meeting. But what we're asking going forward is for more detail to come from the trust to our executive members and to our officers, and that's something that we'll be keeping our eye on, and we'll be chasing the trust up if that doesn't happen. I think that's really important, because we need as much detail, and know you've done a great job, Mark, in get as much information from the trust, but I know it's been difficult, and we want to support you on that. Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything you think? I think that's it on the trust, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Hakewell.
I'd just like to confirm what an officer colleague has said. The point about percentages, exactly as well made, is we wouldn't scrutinise a 2% change in a budget, but we would scrutinise a 20% change or 7 million on home to school transport. So having that is crucial, however we try and work out scrutiny in the future. The point about the fees is that on my phone, I today found that it was £5 up. So someone somewhere has created a £5 increase in that particular item and every other one, which adds up to £227,000. So there must be a system. The question I asked was, when are we going to get, as 78 members, a list of those fees and charges, which must be available, because the web design people must have been able to put it on the web. I just want to ask for it because it's good information for us, even though we might not want to follow it up. And the last point, in answer to your question, Chairman, I would be suggesting that we forthwith tomorrow morning send this report to the executive membership, because it's well written, and I know a lot of work went even over the weekend to write it, with a comment that there will be a verbal update from the chairman on the day. So I would like executive members to start reading this now, because it may frighten them, but it may also prepare them for their budget meeting. So I would move that. Yeah, all of what we've done needs to be in front, because there is no portfolio holder, no leader, no one here tonight at the conclusion of our scrutiny. I would have thought they might have welcomed the opportunity to come and listen to us in person, although they can see us on camera.
The executive. So all I want a hand on is what I'm going to say on behalf of the committee. Can you be about, because you're the vice chair, so we'll get, and we've got a little bit of time to do it, because Paul doesn't need the speech, because that's our speech, and we've got myself, King, you've got you, Paul, haven't we? We've got Councillor Hakewell. That's 2 Conservatives, 1 Independent, 1 Labour. I think that's a good balance, is it? Anybody else want to go on it? No? Brilliant. That's fine. We can do it online as well, so that's not a problem. And this is from us as members, not officers, so we don't have to waste any more of your time, so don't worry about that. So is that okay for everybody, yeah? So the recommendation is this report goes to the executive with the amendment about the Children's Trust. Is there anybody wants to second that proposal from Councillor Hakewell? Can I have all those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Right, have we got anything else on the agenda?
Close the meeting.
Close the meeting.
Unless
anybody else want to say anything? Have I missed anything out? No. Can I thank everybody for their attendance this evening? I will be attending the executive to put our points over, and can I thank you for all the support. This session's almost over now. We've worked really hard on it, and can I thank you all, and it's good that we can all work together, and thank the officers.